Hello everyone, my name is Floof and I am here today to help you learn how to make a little bit of a better 40k competitive list in the current meta right now. This is going to be geared more towards a more generalized approach, but at the same time I am someone who plays mainly Genestealer cults, so this is going to be from the perspective of someone building that type of army and that type of list. Either way, I have been recording this like 16 times, so we're just going to go straight right into it. No funny little bits. I will, however, go ahead and roll the intro. Hello, I am once again cutting into this video, although this is probably going to be the first time you see me. Spoiler alert, it happens like a lot. I'm here to tell you guys, there's a Discord if you want to join it. There's a pretty decent community that we've got going on there. It gives you a more direct access in terms of to ask me questions, as well as others in case I'm busy or I might not have as much experience into the thing you are trying to ask about. As well, I have kind of been advised by a couple other content creators that I should at least make this. So boom, bam, I made a coffee. If you want to donate to support the channel in any way, everything is absolutely appreciated. This is not me asking or telling you to give me money. This is just if you are financially stable enough and you enjoy the content you are given, by all means. As of right now, all of the things that I'm going to be making is going to be given out for free. It's going to be on YouTube. Nothing's going to be behind a paywall. If at some point, you know, we swap to the Art of War Pure Tide program profile to where things are behind Patreon, sure, fine. That'll be at a later time, and I will be fully clear and open and honest with you guys. That being said, I do coaching, I do art commissions. If you want to support and you want something more definitive out of that, those are more avenues to where you can, you know, at least get something else out of it versus just tipping. So on with the video. Thank you so much. If you don't want to do it, obviously you are under no obligation. I do not want any pressure to be here on this kind of topic. So don't like it, just ignore it. I won't be bringing it up anymore. Links are in the description. Bye. For those of you who don't know, my name is Floof. I am a GSC player that I like to think, you know, knows their stuff a little bit. I've gotten a couple wins here and there. While I'm still relatively new to the scene, though, I have kind of realized that Genestealer cults as a faction doesn't have a whole lot of content, and so I've made this channel to kind of fill in that gap. After taking a small little break after my LVO break, we are back, and I wanted to come in with one of the things that I am frequently asked about the most, which is list building. Like I stated before, this is going to be more a generalized list building video, but it is going to be from the perspective of someone who plays GSC, so obviously those are going to be the models I'm using today. Before you click off, hey, GSC isn't that complicated, I promise you, and you might even learn a couple things if you don't play the faction. So now, I do want to cut in here. We're just going to do a flash cut from Floof from the future. Before we get into the video too much, one of the things I want to mention is that I don't think this video is going to be your standard, like, hey, you need to take something to hold a point, hey, you need to take something to score, and hey, you need to take something to go kill your opponent. I feel like we all kind of know that's what you need to do. There's dozens of this style of video that all kind of say the same thing. What I want to try and focus on for this video is making people aware of the why you're putting stuff in, and to look a little bit deeper at the units you are bringing and how you can flex them to fill multiple roles. So that's what we've got going on here. I hope this helps. I didn't want to make just a standard, you know, 30-minute list of, hey, here's how you build Space Marines, right? Sure, fine, that's doable, but I think a fresh take could help. So if I did that, please let me know down in the comments. If you think I missed the mark, well, hey, maybe I'll revisit this in a couple months when I've learned a bit better on how to write scripts and get my point across. Yay. To start off about list writing, I want to start with the conversation about archetypes and playstyles. Because to be successful with any type of list, to be successful with any type of army, or just in the game in general, it is best to have a army list that works with your playstyle, an archetype that you have fun with, if that makes sense. The two are similar, but they are obviously, we know the difference between the two, right? We can go through and define them real quick just so we know the context in which I'm talking about them today. but I'm pretty sure most people here just kind of understand the words, right? Cool. Now, to give quick definitions, the archetype in this context is generally what is seen as the overall build type. You have like aggressive style or more active archetypes, I would say. These are your pressure style lists, similar that you often see like Blood Angels or Orcs or World Eaters try and use. I would say even jail style archetypes are in here, to where you have like what used to be Space Wolves, Thunderwolf Cav, Wolf Jail was called, right? And similar, more just I want to be in your face and push my army forward archetypes, right? Now, with that as well, you could put more stat check style armies in here. Those are a little bit on the niche case scenario, so I'm not going to put them in either active or what I was going to talk about next, passive. There's going to be a little middle ground in between. Know that what I'm talking about, however, is a general spectrum of archetypes, right? Now, for more passive archetypes, how I see like Gunline, you have your castle kind of, I'm just going to stand back and shoot you all game and put a couple things up forward, but I'm not trying to get that far up the board, right? The uppy downy archetypes really fit in here as well, at least in my opinion, because these are looking to more reactively punish your opponent's movements. If they play too far back, then you can drop directly in front of them and keep them in their deployment zone. If they play too far aggressive and are sloppy with their screens, then you can kind of come in and pick off a lot of valuable things very quickly, right? Returning back to the middle from active and passive, we also have things like your mixed or toolbox lists. These are, think of like your Space Marines Gladius, to where they kind of have just a little bit of everything, an answer to every type of problem, the jack of all trades armies, if you will. I think Votann also kind of trying to do this as well with their builds of like a couple land forts, couple bikes, couple terminators, couple regular guys, a little bit of basically their entire line, right? Cool. Now, in this, between all three of the active, passive, and in the middle groups, you have skew or stat check, like I was talking about, right? And depending on the matchup and how you are trying to stat check your opponent, that can often dictate whether the archetype that you're playing wants to be more aggressive or passive, right? If it's something like Knights or maybe Custodian Elite Spam, you want to be more aggressive because you want your opponent to have as little time as possible to react to your defensive profiles before you overwhelm them, versus something like Swarm, to where you really want to limit the amount of attacks that your opponent can put out to you, so you might be a little bit more defensive, right? It all depends. Now, as I'm kind of going in and out of this, I'm talking a lot about how you're playing. That's because archetypes are very intertwined with play styles. More aggressive and active archetypes probably want to be more aggressive and active in their playstyle, right? You want to run up the board with a World Eaters list, you're playing a very active, aggressive playstyle, right? That can totally fit with you. For me personally, I like to be a more defensive player, at least in the starting turns. So I really like these swarm, uppy downy kind of detachments that allow me to have a bunch of stuff, have a bunch of resources to very early on trade non-committally here and there, and then come down once I have all the ability to put all of my buffs online, right? Cool. So that's why I have value like Hosts of Ascension, because to me that is something that lines up with the playstyle I like. Cool, fantastic. The reason that I'm bringing up a lot of the archetypes and playstyles is that I want to, in this video, have a moment to where we get the tools to look at other different data sheets and things that we're putting in our lists in a very objective sense, words, in a very objective sense, and essentially break them down and see them as tools, right? What does this tool do? Why am I bringing it? How much of it do I really need? And how effective is it? And also, I think the most important part, how versatile is it? If I'm in a scenario to where I didn't think about or plan for, can this be used in a creative way to kind of get me out, right? To help me get my path to victory. Cool? To break those things down, I like to at least have 4 different areas to not necessarily grade my units on, but just say how well do they do in this category, how well do they do in this one, and this one, right? And those 4 categories are offensive, defensive, scoring, and points per model. Now, in offensive, you have your ranged output, your melee output, generally your movement as well can be very important, you know, advance and charge, all that kind of stuff. Being able to deliver your damage, as well as for both offensive and defensive, this is where I'm going to put a lot of utility buffs. Like, think of the Primus, allowing me to have full rerolls to hit. While that doesn't directly buff him, that is buffing his, well, it does when he's attached to a unit, it can buff a lot of what he attaches to be a force multiplier for the offensive capabilities, right? Same thing with an Acolyte Icon Ward. A 5-up Feel No Pain to whatever I attach is obviously going to bring the defensive rating up. Cool, fantastic. Now, talking about defensive rating, this is where I'm going to be judging things based on their saves, their toughness, the amount of wounds they have, and also very importantly, the amount of models. Based on the scenario of what gun my opponent is shooting at me, 20 guardsmen can be just as good, if not better, than 5 Terminators, right? I know that can seem a little weird because you're kind of like, floof, everything's kind of got bolters attached to it. Sure, that's totally fair. You kind of got to pay that tax getting into this game. However, if you're in a meta kind of like how we are right now in the early 2025s, to where a lot of the shooting and damage and honestly just melee output seems to be low volume, high quality attacks, to where they're hitting on 2s or 3s, they're more than likely wounding on 2s or 3s, a good amount of AP and like damage 3, right? Say you take 6 attacks at damage 3. Cool. Into Terminators, that's really going to hurt because, you know, 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4 of them, if you roll unlucky, are going to die. However, even if you roll absolutely abysmally and your opponent just hits everything, 6 guardsmen are going to die. Cool. You still have a unit there that's going to give a lot of value, still have a lot of OC, and be effective in other areas. Now, to the counterpoint, if my opponent has like a Hurricane Stormbolter 20 million shots, the guardsmen are dead, the Terminators are fine. Sure, right? I just want to make a quick point here that your defensive profile can be good if you think of more scenarios than, you know, just big tank shoot at me, right? Cool, fantastic. Moving on. Thirdly, we've got scoring. This is, I'm going to be grading this off of movement, the amount of OC you have, and I was going to say battle line, but just honestly your amount of keywords. If you are infantry, beast or swarm, all of those are fantastic. If you have fly, that's amazing. If you are battle line, phenomenal. All of these things open gateways for you to either get around the board easier, or if you are battle line, you have access in like the stalwarts missions, the swift actions, all that type of stuff, to where you're able to do X thing while still doing an action, which might not come up every turn, but there are going to be a lot of scenarios to where, oh, hey, because I have this battle line unit, I can do this thing, right? Now, that being said, full bias here, I am playing an army that has fantastic battle line. Genestealer Cult is practically made by its battle line. There's only like, I want to say 2 of our 4 or 5 really good detachments that don't take a lot of battle line. And even then, we've still got Flaccos and a bunch of other things that are just so good utility pieces that we're still kind of taking them, right? Lastly, points per model. This is very straightforward. This is kind of the end all be all, the thing that makes or breaks a great unit. You can have S in your offensive profile, your defensive profile, and your scoring capabilities. Somehow you're just God's perfect unit. But if you cost 10 times the amount of points as the guy who's got like an A in 2 categories and a B in the others, maybe I'm actually going to take the other guy because it's just more efficient, right? It's all depends and it's all contextual in terms of your army, the local meta, and what you want to do. But this is kind of the thing to where I think this is the real deciding factor. No, you're good. I can always edit stuff out. You're fine. Now, we have these 4 defined. Let's go ahead and just like give a couple examples, right? Before we really break down one unit and chop it all up, right? So like say you're really good offensively, you're defensively not the best, and you're scoring wise not doing that well. So we'll give like an A, C, C. I'm also, these are arbitrary letter grades. It doesn't really matter that well. Now, points per model, let's say actually you're doing pretty well. You don't cost that much, but you have like high movement, high attacks, but you're pretty flimsy. Well, you're probably got a very aggressive unit that seems appealing due to its ability to trade really well. You don't want it to like sit on points and just be like, I'm totally going to take the guard army straight to the face and live. I'll be fine. No, you're probably going to be on the other side of a wall, run forward, and kill something with that unit, right? Cool. Now, on the other hand, you might have something that is defensively really great. The scoring is okay. The movement isn't that high. We're basically talking a Terminator profile here, and the points are okay. This is probably something that you want to have further back into your army, to where you don't want to trade it for nothing. Maybe you have this on your natural expanse behind a wall, and when your opponent gets a little too cheeky moving up, it goes out and tries to hold the front line for at least a turn or 2. Sure, fine. Even though it might be poor in some stats, so long as it's filling a role that you need, it's takeable. I'm not saying, oh, if it has an F in one of these categories, don't ever take it. It's just, you need to understand what it's bringing to the table, and if you need that job done, then take it. If you don't need that job done, or there's something that can do it more efficiently, don't take it, right? We're gonna cut in here just real quick, because I want to give a mention as we're breaking the models down, or at least their data sheets down, and really understand something. I totally understand when you want to take a cool model just because it's cool. If you're wanting to do that, and you kind of understand that the rules aren't the best, then you're an adult, right? We go do whatever you want to do. Now, at the same time, if you want to build a more competitive list, there are going to be some times to where you need to separate the rules from the model, right? To where you need to take the cool looking model and just kind of put it to the side and just look at the rules of the unit itself, okay? For example, this is my Magnus. I am still working on this, but this is the one that I have for my Thousand Suns army. This is one of my best models that I've ever painted. Ignore the little glue things here. One of the times I tried to record this earlier, he fell off his base, and so. Now, this guy looks obviously amazing, right? He looks phenomenal. I am in a lucky spot to where if I'm in a lucky spot to where if I'm playing Thousand Suns, I kind of need to take Magnus. Lucky's with quotations and asterisks, because obviously Thousand Suns being the spot to where, you know, they're not an army without Magnus isn't the best, but I digress. This is an example of a thing to where cool model lines up with great rules, we can take the unit, right? Fantastic. Now, I'm going to bring in a couple things that are not necessarily bad models, but say for the builds that I like, they don't fit in right now, right? Cool. Boom. Let's snap to it. These are my kit bashed abominants. This one was the first one I ever kit bashed. It was from an RT many, many years ago, where me and now one of my best friends, we played against each other, and he was on Blood Angels. It's a very tough match. I ended up winning, and one of the other rewards I got was a Gravis Captain. And so I took my Abominant and this Gravis Captain, and the story behind it is essentially that we captured him, couldn't get him out of the suit, but we still injected him with stuff to make him an Abominant, and now he's like bursting out, right? Almost has like the story of a Penitent engine to where he's earning his stars and stripes, and we're just kind of sending him out until he dies. That's why there's so much battle damage on him, right? Cool. The other one is one of my more recent kit bashes for an Abominant, to where I took one of the orcs from basically their version, Sigmar's version of Kill Team. And I mean, this one's just cool. It was one of my first freehanding attempts to where I got the GSC symbol on the chest. Overall, fantastic. Now that I've talked about all those things, The Abominants are fantastic. However, in Host, I'm not really ever running Aberrants, at least in the list that I build. So while I would love to put these guys on the table, I think they're phenomenal. I don't even think this one has, the most recent one, has even seen the tabletop. It just happens to be that the lists I like aren't running those units. And as much as I would love to put them on the tabletop, right now I'm kind of only going to tournaments, and I've realized, hey, they're not a part of the game plan that I want to run to try and win events, right? Now, not saying that everything has to be like this, but just let's have a moment that maybe there's one thing to where you're going, I'm kind of only fielding this just because I did well on the paint job, and you can totally do that. But also, let's be aware that sometimes it's okay to be like, I'll put you on the shelf. For like a GT, maybe I'll put you on the shelf. Let's go ahead and break down the model that I take too much of and got nerfed. It's great, I love. The Neophyte Hybrid. I have a problem because I have way too many of these guys. I have like 120 in my case, 40 old ones that I've already phased out because the kit bashes are just old and I've done better, and now I've got like 40 more from Brood Brothers, Kill Team, and then the Necromunda Hive Scum stuff. It's a problem. I've got a lot. I can basically field 2 different Swarm House lists. Now, let's break the unit down and talk about what it does, and then I'll kind of explain what kind of tool I see it as and why I take it so much, right? So, Neophytes, offensively, inconsistent, poor. I wouldn't say bad, it's just inconsistent, right? The heavy weapons hit on 5s, heavy stubbers are on 4s. You have to take 2 different heavy weapons for any of the squads, which I don't understand why they box lock this unit, but sure, fine, whatever. So you can't even like run 4 mining lasers or 4 seismic cannons or 4 heavy stubbers, right? Which is just big unfortunate. Now, that being said, the amount of dice this unit brings offensively is actually, I think, very good and a good spot for buffs. For any type of damage multipliers, I think this is one of the key units in the army. Now, moving on defensively, T3, 5-up armor. 1 wound, that's really bad. You have access to a Feel No Pain with an attached character, but not the best. However, it's a 10-man and a 20-man. You can take these in. And in certain lists, that can be backbreaking if you take a lot of them, or in other detachments to where you don't want to take a whole lot of them. They're still great for screens. They're still good for doing actions because their bases are so small, right? So it's a give and take. Defensively, I think they're decent because the amount of models save them. Now, scoring-wise, like I was kind of getting into in the last category, I think these guys are phenomenal. Once again, base sizes are small, so you can fit them in areas to do actions very well. As a 10-man or a 20-man, they screen beautifully. I absolutely love them. They're OC2, they're battle line, they have native deep strike. Overall, phenomenal. They also sticky objectives at the end of your command phase, which is 10 out of 10. Absolutely love it. The only thing that I don't think is the best for them is they have a 6-inch movement. Not that great. Once they are on the board, they'll get there eventually, but man, 6 inches isn't the best, right? Now, points per model, I think they're great. I think when I was originally trying to start filming this video like 2 months ago, I would give them an S rank, but you know, they took a bit of a points nerf, maybe because a certain Californian and Irishmen were spamming Swarm House at too many events, but I digress. 6.5 points per model for the 10-man, 7.25 for the 20-man if I'm doing math right, and by doing math right and pretending to do it in my head, I actually had to pull up the calculator and cut to it. I'm a liar. They're fantastic. They're one of our cheapest units. I believe they are our cheapest non-character unit to have in the army if you're not, you know, using any of the allied detachments. So they definitely fill a role. Put 10 in a truck and you can run a transport up, dump 20 OC onto a point. Overall, I think these guys are good, and you should be making any GSC list with at least 1 or 2, right? So overall, what do we have here? We have a body that offensively and defensively doesn't seem that flashy, but can be phenomenal for damage and defensive multipliers. As well, it can be a big staple for any type of list that want to amplify that in a way to where they're kind of stat checking their opponent with this mass amount of dice rolled against them and massive amount of bodies that they have to chew through. With that being said as well, in a scoring matchup, they are some of the best. Being able to regenerate in your command phase to take points away from your opponents, as well as, you know, being OC2, battle line, being able to move through walls and move block effectively. This is something that can very effectively bully primary. Now, we know what this tool does. It bullies primary, it's difficult for low volume attacks to shift, and it's a great multiplier for buffs. Cool. Let's go ahead and start to build a list with that in mind, and we're going to bring in some other, obviously we're going to bring in other detachments to make the list, because I unfortunately can't make a list of just only Neophytes. They stopped me at 120 right now. But also we're going to bring in other units. I'm not going to break them down as much as Neophytes, but I am going to talk about why they're brought in, why they're implemented, and what you should be looking for when adding things to your list. Now we're going to bring in one of the earlier discussion points of the playstyles and archetypes. I need to find something that works for me, right? So we're going to go through the army rule and all the detachments, and I'm going to pretend that maybe I don't pick Host of Ascension for this list. It's up in the air, folks. So you need to find something that fits your playstyle and fits your archetype. Obviously, we kind of all have our armies right now. But with that being said, with codexes out and Grotmist detachments, there is going to be a good amount of armies in this game that can change how they play and what they play with. So you might be able to, within the context of GSC, if I wanted to build a pressure list, I could go into Broodsurge. If I want to build this stat check uppy downy army, then I can go into Host of Ascension. If I want to play like a MSU kind of control, then I can go into Outlander Claw, or maybe not necessarily Xenocreed. That's also pretty pressure, but I digress. So let's break this down bit by bit. If you do not have a Genestealers army, that's fine, follow along, but just supplement your army rules and try and really understand just how much you can get out of anything and everything they give you. Some armies are going to be a bit more vanilla on what they give you. Obviously GSC is a bit more complex, but still, know every bit of value that you can get from both your army rule and your detachment rule. It's going to allow you to find things that maybe others don't, or understand why some of the top players are bringing X amount of things, right? Cool. Starting off, Cult Ambush. 10 resurgence points. When something dies, we can spend an amount of points equal to what it was that died to bring it back. When we do, we set a little token down. At the end of our opponent's movement phase, they can come in 3 inches of that token, so long as an enemy didn't move within 9 inches of that token, or we can just deep strike the unit. It is considered a type of strategic reserves, but not necessarily strategic reserves itself, so they don't die at the end of turn 3 if they're in Cult Ambush. That's basically it. We can put what everything is worth right here as of right now, of date of recording. This is the 30th. It's good. I love it. This is an army rule that I think is fantastic, allows skill expression within the army, and overall is just wonderful to work with. It might be a little complicated to look at first, but generally no, it's like, hey, in your lists, try and bring in a variety of different units. That way when you play against an opponent going into the match, you understand what you can use more aggressively, because you can buy it back when it dies, and keep trying to throw that profile into your opponent because it might be their weakness in that matchup. Does that make sense? Cool. That being said, most of the time you're bringing back 25 acolytes in 5-mans, but well, I digress. So we have this army rule that allows us to be incredibly diverse in what we want to do and how we want to react to the gameplay as the game goes on. Cool. Now let's start to look at detachments and all of their rules. I'm going to go through these very quick, because while this is going to be a bit more generalized, this is the part where I break down things in the aspect of Genestealers, also earlier, right? So First off, my second favorite, Xenocreed Congregation. This gives you reroll advancing charges if your unit is led, and then if those leaders are one of the special 3, that's going to come up a couple times in this detachment, a Primus, a Magus, or an Acolyte Icon Ward. Those characters get a 3-up Feel No Pain. Now, most of the enhancements, I believe all of them can only go on your special 3, and a lot of the stratagems benefit you if it in some way involves those 3. You get advance and charge, and then rerolls to that charge if you're charging into something that had a character unit in it, or one of your characters in it. So say you charge a Sanctus into something, your unit that would get advance and charge can reroll charges now into the unit that the Sanctus is engaged with. Cool, great. You can get assault on all of your weapons. The main stratagem is +1 weapon skill, attack, and hazardous on your weapons. You're already very flimsy, so having this on your stuff is fine. You'll be good. You were gonna die anyways. You can rapid ingress something so long as you don't have any cult ambush markers, and then for 1 CP you can get either reroll 1s or full rerolls if they killed one of the special 3 on a unit that killed a character. Cool, great, fantastic. There's a couple other things like in Broodsurge, but I digress. One of the main aspects of this is the enhancement that allows you to have 2 extra resurgence points, bringing you up to 12. That's fantastic. It changes a lot of the math on what you can bring back. Overall, this detachment is very strong. Moving on, we're going to look at Biosynctic Broodsurge. This is your melee detachment. You get +1 to charge, and if you made a charge, if you made a charge that turn, then you get +1 attack. This allows you to have a stratagem that also gives you up to +3 to attack, to charge if you charge multiple things. So out of Deep Strike, depending on what you hit, you can make like a 5-inch charge. Cool. So you have a 6-inch Paladin Consolidate. You have +1 to wound against monsters or vehicles, which is insane. And then you also have stuff like you can move one of your blip markers if it's like a Genestealer one, sure, fine. And then if they kill like a Patriarch or an Abominant, deal mortal wounds to them. Or it's deal D3, but if it was an Abominant or Patriarch, deal 2 D3. So nice little tricks. Enhancements for like Infiltrate and a couple other things for +1 AP and damage, which is almost always going on a Patriarch. Overall, solid detachment, very melee focused. If that's what you want to do, if you want to play this like pressure melee style list, boom, you're here. Outlander Claw is this very movement shenanigan, like trading, ticking you down with just a bunch of 1,000 paper cuts army that is very cool, wins in the movement phase. However, I don't normally play it a whole lot, so I don't have the most experience with it. Mainly, I'm just not Australian, so it doesn't mesh with me that well. That being said, if playing like a tricksy army like that, or just having like a Mad Max themed army is your kind of jam, I would totally recommend it. It's a very cool army to run. Lastly, Host of Ascension. This is when you come in from when you are set up on the battlefield until the end of your next fight phase, you get sustained hits 1 and ignores cover. So this does affect melee as well, and it does count for coming from Cult Ambush. This is my bread and butter detachment. You get a 6-inch Deep Strike, you get crit 5s, you get go back up into reserves after someone has shot at you. It's overall a very hard hitting detachment. This is the one to where you go, I want to table my opponent. That's what I'm aiming to do, right? Your game plan kind of rides on that, because if you don't, well, hey, you're all out and probably exposed. You're probably going to die on the crackback. So, this one, I play it as a primarily shooting army. However, because sustained hits does apply in melee, you can run like a mixed, a combined arms archetype to where you're running a good amount of shooting, a good amount of melee, and you're trying to kill your opponent through multiple phases, which is very good. I would love to put the other 2 detachments up here for Final Day and Brood Brothers Auxilia, but the reason why I'm talking about these for list construction is I want to give an example of, hey, I'm going to a new local game store, my new LGS. I haven't played there before, and I just want to take a balanced list. And so it's going to be much easier to make one of those lists with the 4 detachments already listed versus something that brings in allies, and now we have to talk about 2 different armies. So for complexity's sake, we're just going to keep those 2 out of the video. I will make something at a later time to talk about Final Day specifically, because I think there is a lot of things to work through and figure out in that detachment that I think is very interesting. And Brood Brothers Auxilla, it's still bad even after Guard Codex. So, but hey, triple Dorn Tank Commander is funny, I think. You can probably take that, right? I don't know. Anyways, so say my name is John Warhammer. I'm going to this RTT at my new LGS that I just moved into. Cool. Let's build a list. We've gone over the army rule. We've gone over all the detachments. In my opinion, for a more generalist style of list, I would want to take Host of Ascension. It's index, so I have a lot of experience with it. It can be a mixed arms detachment, and it doesn't struggle into some archetypes like Outlander Claw and Xenocreed can struggle into. More so Xenocreed itself, just because monster spam, or like Greater Demons and Tyrannid Monster Mash can be a struggle for Xenocreed to deal with. Not the biggest struggle, but out of the four, it is the notable drawback. Now, we're picking Host, and we talked about how this detachment is great for damage modifiers, right? It gives you sustained hits, and it gives you crit 5s. Cool. Earlier, we talked about a unit that really loves that type of thing, right? We talked about Neophytes. So let's go ahead and add those into the start of the list. We're going to talk about, as we talk about everything, let's go ahead and just shove them up here, shove the list up here, why we're adding the units that we're adding, right? Now, I'm not going to make Swarm Host because I don't think everyone can run a 100 Neophyte detachment. So I'm going to make a general list. Here is some melee, here is some Neophytes, a good core. I am just getting into GSC. Fantastic. To start off, we are going to be throwing in 50 Neophytes, 2 20-mans, and a 10-man. I promise you this is reserved for me. We're going to have them with the anti-tank loadouts to where it's mining lasers, frag grenade, or grenade launchers that can do frag or crack, Webbers, and seismic canons. 2 of them are going to be led, one by a Primus with the enhancement, a flaw in their armor, and then one with a Benefactus, which is going to have Assassination Edict, allowing it to give its unit +1 to hit when it is shooting a character unit. Not always going to be relevant, because sometimes you just want to have this unit to be shooting and cracking up transports for your melee units to then charge the containers for, but it's still something. So sometimes you play into Knights and they have a big old Canis Rex in the middle point and you go, I want that dead. So overall, pretty good. Talk about the characters real quick. Benefactus gives lethals to the full unit, as well as she can bring 1 last cannon shot or 2 if she gives herself hazardous. Once a game, she can also bring her invuln from a 5-up to a 4-up. It's good. It, however, can be a little inconsistent. You'll have 4 last cannon shots in total from this squad. They have lethal. They can have crit 5 lethals even. But 2 of those shots are going to be on 5s. 4s if you stayed still or shooting into characters, but you're either going to deal no damage or you're going to like one-shot Armigers and War Dogs, right? It just kind of is what it is. Now, Primus is going to give full rerolls, so great utility buff there into our damage, our big damage hitting on 5s. Overall great, as well as lethal, so we can hit on 5s, but with crit sustained and lethal 5s, it's just very annoying for our opponent to deal with. As well, one of the things is that he can give a redeploy of 3 units that can go back up into reserves, even past the limit, or just, re-infiltrate, which allows us to play this like infiltrator game to, hey, I'm going to put 5 pure strains in the middle to stop you from setting your scouts in a spot to where I think they would be really advantageous for you, right? It just allows us to fuck with our opponent, for lack of a better words. Now, I want some decent scoring units as well. We've got decent shooting, at least. It's a little inconsistent, but it's still good. I'm gonna go ahead and add in, just to take care of it and make sure I don't ever need to worry about scoring or trading, I'm gonna add in 5 units of 5-man Flamer Acolyte squads. Once again, I promise this is reserved for me. This is me keeping it chill, all right? These guys, they have the rubric rule, so rerolling ones at all time, or full rerolls if you are on a point. The opponent's unit is on the point. For 70 points a pop, these guys are some of the best trading units in the game. They aren't going to outright kill anything and everything, but they're just going to take away enough wounds, right? It doesn't matter if I don't kill your full 5-man squad of scouts or your 5-man JPI. If I bring you to just 2 or 1 model, you're really not doing much that game, right? As well, they can also just, with 5 32mm bases, they're not the hardest to screen out, but they can fit in tight corners to just do actions here and there. As well as just being 2 resurgence points, they're fantastic. We'll throw in 5 pistol acolytes as well, or as I like to call them, 5 tacos, because tool acolytes. These are going to be our Gretchen. They're going to sit on our home point on a 4-up. They give us an extra CP, and then at certain times into very vehicle heavy matchups, we can run them up and go try and eat vehicles, right? They're not the best at doing that. It's 6 attacks on 3s, anti-vehicle 4-up, AP2, damage 3. It's something. Now, we've got good scoring, we've got good shooting. Let's go ahead and talk about our melee output. I'm going to add in a 5-man of aberrants and a 10-man of hybrid metamorphs. These are both going to be led by the biophagus, which gives them lethal hits in melee, as well as once a game +1 to wound against infantry, and then they also can give themselves like +3 attacks and damage. It's not that relevant, but it's funny sometimes. The hybrid metamorphs, in my opinion, are the highest damage output you can have in this detachment. 10 metas coming in with 32 attacks on 3s at 5-1-2, but it's going to be 5-2-2 because of ridgerunners. With crit 5 lethals and sustained, just destroy stuff. And into things that are -1 damage, they have a sweep profile, which is 5 attacks each, so 50 attacks at 4-2-1. Overall, disgusting. I love them. Aberrants as well, they give us a durable unit. It is only a 5-man, so it's not the most durable thing in the world, but it's still something that is -1 to wound because the character is going to be attached. T6 with a 5-up feel no pain and 3 wounds a pop. It's okay. It's a nice, cheap unit that allows us to go trade with some Marines and then be fine. We're probably never going to buy these guys back because they are 5 resurgence points, and that's a little steep. But overall, very good unit. And then stuff that is going to be just for utility and buffing the rest of the army. I know this is going to sound a little weird to put them in the utility category, but I'm going to be adding in 3 units of 5 pure strain Genestealers. Yes, they can be melee threats. They're not really going to be in this detachment with what I'm trying to do with this list. They're going to infiltrate 1 or 2 squads, probably a little aggressively. They move 8, advance and charge, 4 attacks at 2, hitting on 2s at 4-2-1 or 4-3-1 with ridgerunner buff. They're great early game units to where they can move block your opponent's army. They can touch a bunch of stuff that doesn't want to be touched, as well as they can just do early game missions like no other. They can get you behind enemy lines if you want to get it. They can get you any kind of doing actions of containment and all that kind of stuff. Overall, fantastic units. And into certain armies that are like T3 or just don't have, you know, a whole lot of invulns or something like that, they do have to respect 20 attacks at 4-2-1, getting in and eating a unit for free, right? Next up is going to be 3 Achilles ridgerunners with mortars. We're going to have 1 of them with spotter and then 2 of them with survey augers. The survey augers strip away cover, and then the spotter is just going to allow that one to hit on 4s instead of 5s. Now they base hit on 4s, but they're going to be behind walls, normally shooting their indirect, so we're going to be on 5s here, right? They are fantastic. The survey auger, once the unit has shot, it strips away cover for the rest of the turn from one unit that you choose. And then the base ridgerunner buff itself is crossfire, and that's going to give +1 AP on all of our attacks until the end of the turn. It used to in index just be for shooting. Now it is also for melee, which is game changing. You are going to be shooting these out all the time as well. Early on, we're going to be in this list including another indirect source. If you go first and you don't want to, you know, just throw everything out in front of your opponent's army for no reason, you're probably going to do to where you have your 4 mortars go ahead and start to eat away at their chaff units. And as you go throughout the game, and maybe you can get some sight lines with some stubbers from the ridgerunners to where the mortars can go to somewhere else, you can really start to eat away at their chaff and force them to play the game with real units instead of just trash, right? It's kind of hard for a Custodes player when they get a turn to where it's like containment and sabotage and all of their sisters are dead, right? Now they go, do I really want to do this with a warden squad? So it allows us to be versatile with our damage and start to tax our opponent in the game that we want to play. We want to play this trash trading game, right? Well, we're going to win that 9 times out of 10. Last 2 units we're going to add. I talked about the 4th indirect piece. It's going to be the Reductive Saboteur. She's a lone op. She mines you if you get close to her. She has indirect herself, and she can grenade for free. For 65 points, this is one of the best units in the fucking game. I love her. She is a staple on GSC lists. Please, every time you build a GSC list, bring at least one of them. She is worth it. Moving on, however, because if I stay here, I'm going to talk about her forever. Lastly, it's just going to be the truck. This can be, it's gonna have 2 modes. If I think my opponent is going to be very aggressive into me and just push turn 1, I'm going to put the metamorphs in that truck. Getting out of a truck and them shooting at the same target allows the 9 hand flamers in the metamorph squad to have full rerolls. So if they're charging into something, it's going to be 96 hand flamers, full rerolls at probably +1 AP to soften it up, and then they go in and kill it, right? Overall, great. However, if I think I'm going to be playing a slower, more defensive game, I'm probably putting the aberrants and like 5 hand flamer acolytes into the truck. That way I can use it as a staging point to go send out a melee threat and then a little trading threat, and we can play a little bit more MSU that way, right? And that's basically the list. We have 20 points after that to where we can put either Our Time Is Nigh or Prowling Adjutant on one of the biophages. It depends on what you want more. If you want +2 to charge once in the game, sure, totally fine. Or weirdly enough, with the metamorphs, I liked having the Prowling Adjutant. It's if you move within 9, they can move d6 inches. So now you have this unit that has a 5-up Feel No Pain, a Broodsurge move if you kill it. It can go up as well if you shoot it and I don't want to Broodsurge into you, or I can just reactive move when you move within 9. It's just it's just annoying to deal with. So I prefer Prowling Adjutant. Some people swear by Our Time Is Nigh. It's totally up to you and totally up to preference in my opinion. Now, we have this list here. This list, if I can narrow it down and use the tools we talked about earlier, wow. This is a very defensive style list that does look to flip to be aggressive on its drop turns with the Primus squad and the metamorphs coming in. It wants to, in one turn, cripple your opponent. However, outside of that, it's kind of just trying to be annoying and clip you here and there to make you less reactive and really tone down your offensive capabilities into this army, because it is paper thin, right? So decent defensive uppy downy army that has a go turn. Overall, this kind of stuff fits my playstyle. So cool, we have ended up with something to where if I take this to that RTT, I feel like I'm going to do very well. It allows me to have a lot of scoring, as well as a variety of different units to bring back based on the matchup, so I can kind of change based on what I'm going into, right? Cool, fantastic. Hello, I am once again cutting into the middle of this video. One thing that I think also needs to be touched on here is the balance of support and actual units in your army. This mainly people talk about it in the context of the characters that you add, and a lot of times people might miss just the amount of overall other units that you're bringing, right? To put it in context of like Space Marines, yeah, 3x5 scouts and 3x5 infiltrators is going to allow you to kind of do whatever you want in terms of the secondary game, but you might spend so many points into that the rest of your army kind of suffers because it doesn't have multiple waves to send out to deal with your opponent's army. Now, in some matchups, 3x5 infiltrators and 3x5 scouts is going to just be obscene, right? It's going to be disgusting for your opponent to deal with, but in a more general broad sense, maybe it actually is hurting you. So in terms of the characters, I like to break it down to where I have 3 or 4 offensive bricks that I know I just want to shove into my opponent's army or do whatever, right? those are probably where I want my buffs, and outside of that, I kind of want to hold off a little bit. I don't want to buff every single 5-man and every single 10-man or 20-man that I'm adding into my army. Sometimes adding in too many characters gives you diminishing returns. If everyone is buffed to the gills, but you spent 600 points buffing them, maybe you wouldn't be as effective if you just spent 300 or 400 points buffing them, and then you just had some more cheap trading units, right? Think about this. If you bring 6 full bricks and they're all buffed to the gills, but you've only got like 2 or 3 scoring units outside of that, what happens if for a primary turn you have a unit on the point with like 8 or 9 OC, and I just put 5 Flacos there, and I take the point, and I deny you primary? Your unit absolutely is going to kill mine, sure, but I have invalidated it with a much cheaper unit, right? And maybe I can keep doing that throughout the whole turn, or the whole game. It can set you up to a point to where you are too expensive and have too few things to play the game of Warhammer 40,000. Same thing for buff units outside of that. A good example for Genestealer cults is the Achilles Ridgerunner, right? I always take 3 of them. That is 255 points of my army that I always reserve for at least 3 of them with mortars. The reason why is they give +1 AP and they strip cover, at least the ones that have Survey Augur, until the end of the turn. Overall, I think they're a unit that just does insane work, but if I get to a point to where I have a hybrid metamorph squad, I have 3 hybrid metamorph squads with 3 different biophages attached to the different units, and they're all in trucks, and I all have, you know, Achilles Ridgerunners tagging what they're about to go into. That's great. Let me just do quick maths here. So if I do this thing of putting in these trucks to give wound rerolls as well as protecting them, and the Ridgerunner supports and all this kind of stuff, I have now spent almost 1,200 points, 1,140 points for all of these buffs, not counting enhancements. And my opponent goes, cool, you killed 3 things. Anyways, I'm gonna decimate half of your army now, or at least the trucks and the metas, right? And that can just be an absolutely crippling blow. However, if we're in a point to where, hey, I've got this meta squad that can go deal with these guys, and then actually the indirect can kind of deal with this 5-man scout squad with the pure strain unit, and then these 5 acolytes can at least go on to this point where this Terminator is touching it, stop you from scoring the primary, and at least hold them off for a turn so I can go deal with it, right? So try and find the balance that you want in terms of the support, whether that be through various units or your characters. Now, each army wants to operate in a different aspect. In some armies, the unit that is attaching to the character is actually going to be support for that character itself. One of my favorite examples to use is orcs. I think the war bosses are kind of the thing that makes the army tick, and the boys can kind of just be seen as a blade of wounds around that war boss itself. That's where a lot of the main damage can lie in, right? You don't see that as much in Genestealer cults, because even though we have, what, 16, 17 characters, we have more characters than we have other regular data sheets. All of the characters themselves are very cheap and are looking to buff cheap things, okay? In terms of GSC, if you spend 80 points on a Primus, he needs to be getting a little bit more than 80 points worth of value, because for 70 points, I could have just gotten 5 more Flacos. For 80 points, I could have got a 5-man metamorph squad, right? You need to understand what is the line of too much support. I'm kind of tangenting here. I apologize for that, but it is very important for people to understand, don't put too much support in. Sometimes it's better to just put in another unit. Cool? Great. Now, I have built my list. And I've kind of walked through the process as to why I've included a lot of the units themselves. I've talked about the acolytes scoring me a bunch of points along with the pure strains. I've talked about the utility of the characters and the ridgerunners coming in, as well as the truck helping out the metas or aberrants and flacos. And then my 3 main damage pieces being the metamorphs and the 2 neophyte squads. Although the aberrants can do pretty nice damage, but they're not going to go, you know, kill a 10-man Terminator squad, right? That's not their goal. So it really does depend on what you bring and the tools that you are bringing to do it. Now, Here's where the nuance comes in. Based on your army, based on your detachment, based on just the list you kind of want to run, what tools you want to bring are going to change vastly. There could be something to where you want to play a hero hammer archetype to where you're just running oops all fucking Catons and Necrons, right? To where it's like Silent King, every Caton you could take, and I don't know, like the fucking Tesseract Vault. You could play a parking lot style list with guard to where all of your characters are tank commanders and everything is just tanks and just fucking tanks. You might not need as much support then because you're trying to stat check your opponent with just so much hull that you actually need that mass amount of the defensive profile. Although you have engineers, you'll be fine. The reason why I'm bringing this up, sometimes you're going to be in an area of list building to where you look at a unit and in other builds, in other things that you have seen in the meta, the unit isn't taken or people online say it's bad. However, if that tool is something that you need in your army and it fulfills a specific role, then it doesn't matter what people online say. It can be good for your list. If it works, it fucking works. A win is a win, right? Look at all of your units and don't let the online rigmarole tell you what is good and what isn't good. Obviously, results are going to be indicative of something being good, but try and understand the why behind it. Don't let Cool Model or your online friend Jeremy tell you something is good and totally takeable. Try and figure it out for yourself. So now I can take this list in a bunch of different areas based, say I go to that event, learned a couple things about my meta, I can totally change it. Say there's a bunch of Black Templar players who are bringing like the 20-man bricks of just dudes that are all 2 wounds a pop, right? Sure, maybe I bring in demo charges and pretend that Feel No Pains don't exist and he won't make any of them, right? If my meta is super heavy, maybe I do bring in just a bunch more anti-tank to where I'm running, you know, 3 or 4 bricks of Neophytes, all with the mining lasers and Benefecti. Or I switch over to Broodsurge and give like 30 Aberrants plus 1 to wound against their whole army. Cool, fantastic, right? It all depends, it all can change. I hope today and this video has helped give you the tools, or at least not even giving you the tools, but let you know the tools exist and the tools are there to go just check over your list one more time and build something cool, build something fun, and build something that fits for you. It might not be the most meta thing in the world, but it might be a little bit, just a little bit more. So I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, please go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe, go ahead and leave a comment about anything or everything. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.